Kia ora tātou katoa. Thank you, Abby. As Abby said, I'm Karen Fifield, and I've got the great pleasure of emceeing this with these wonderful people to talk with you this afternoon. I guess if we consider the Sustainable Development Goals, which is it's a thing very close to my heart, and we think about what business can do with Sustainable Development Goals, it really is about supporting community and about having a thriving community that supports our businesses. So on our panel today, we have Aimee, who is the Director of Innovation Unit, Eliot, who is a Community Campaign Organiser for Action Station, Tony, who is the CEO of Ports of Auckland Limited, and Nola, who is the Co-Convenor of GenZero, but also she is a Unesco Aotearoa youth leader. One of the things that we want to explore is how collaboration with communities can positively transform business. And all of you in this room, because you are very keen on this, you will have examples of how your business has embraced the community that supports your business and how your business can then support that community. I know we do at Wellington Zoo. It's very important as a community asset that we actually embrace community, and we are very clear about inclusion and diversity, about how we actually go about that in our business. I think community really is what we serve, no matter what our business is. And sustainable businesses, I think it's even more important around community. We have a higher priority around that. And I think that's changing with a lot of businesses, that it's not just about, as Abby said, not just about shareholders, but about stakeholders. And this is where community comes to play. So an example of this work is Social Enterprise Innovation Unit, who aim to create a world where more people belong and contribute to thriving societies. So Aimee, can you tell us why Innovation Unit thinks it's important to take a community-centred approach? One great example of your community engagement work is your Māori-centred approach to Heart Health Project. Can you tell us what you've learnt from this process? I'll go back over these questions for you so you don't have to do it all at once, that you think is helpful for business to know. And lastly, Action Station, oh no, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Take that back. You've just got 2 questions. So, why it's important to take a community approach? Go for it.
Cool. So I think the first thing I would say is that we have a deep belief in the power of collaborative problem solving, and that the people that are most affected by the challenges that we're trying to tackle can and should be active participants in helping us to grapple with these really important challenges. So we use the methods and mindsets of co-design and social innovation as our kind of practice. And most of our work currently, I should say, is in the education and health sectors. So this is definitely a new space for me, but hopefully some transferable kind of learnings. One of our key mindsets is that people are the experts in their own lives, and we always in an innovation process will start with deeply engaging with people to understand their lived experience, and use that kind of ethnographic kind of style of working to generate some really powerful insights about what the challenges are and what the biggest opportunities for change are. It's really an important distinction to be made from consultation, where I think just asking people what they think doesn't necessarily always get us there. The other really key part of our way of working is that we're not only sort of doing that research kind of approach, but we're then inviting people, including the community, into a space that they can be part of the problem solving kind of process, and to generate new solutions, and really critically to test those solutions before we try and implement them, which we're often quite good at jumping straight to solution mode. So yeah, that's some sort of bits about our way of working. I'm quite taken with the fact that you guys are latching on to regeneration as a theme, and there's a guy that I quite like called Daniel Christian Wall, who some of you might be familiar with, who's a bit of a guru around regeneration, and he has this quite grim quote that I thought I would finish this question off, which is, we're all passengers on this living spaceship called Planet Earth, and we are now, it's 12 and we are now invited to collaborate or die, you know, and it is grim, but I think we have to find new ways to work with communities and to really harness that, the latent wisdom that we don't often get to kind of get in the room.
So just a little bit, talk a little bit more about the Heart Health Project.
Yes.
And also when you go through that, what can business learn from that and that process that you went through?
Yeah, so this was a piece of work that we did with the Heart Foundation of New Zealand. It was initiated because the Ministry of Health had dropped the age for screening for Māori by 15 years in recognition that actually, you know, it's a national crisis, the inequality that Māori experience. And the Heart Foundation, rather boldly, I thought, brought us in to undertake a social innovation process, really stepping out in faith and going, we don't know where this will lead, but really trying to deeply understand from a Māori perspective what the challenges and opportunities were. And we generated, I think, some really powerful insights in that process, which were quite transformational for the Heart Foundation in terms of their thinking about what their role was. And, you know, things around the influence of whakapapa and how people are influenced by generations that are either no longer with us or not even here yet. And the other piece that was really important in that work was the kind of co-design process where we brought together some absolutely phenomenal people who had really significant mana and deep kind of understanding of Te Ao Māori to generate solutions that we just never would have got to on our own. So I think for me, there's just something about that power of the collective. And I think the other kind of important learning for this group is just that strength of Te Ao Māori, you know. Around the world, Indigenous cultures have this common thread of, you know, interconnectedness with our environment, and that's got to be where we go to, surely. And I think we should, as the theme of this conference kind of suggests, look back to look forward. So.
Okay, thank you. So I take from that being brave and thinking about things a little bit differently, and I think Te Ao Māori really is, we need to embrace that more. And so I think those points really resonate for me coming out of that. And we had quite a conversation at the board table today about being brave, and actually now is the time to be brave, and we've heard that resonate through some of the speeches today. So it's really about taking that bull by the horns, sorry for the animal analogy, but just actually getting in there and being quite brave. The next person we're going to hear from is Eliot, and an example of this sort of work with community is happening with Action Station. So they are a community campaigning organisation of, wait for it, over 180,000 members. We should be talking to them, don't you think? With a focus on people-powered change. So Eliot, in 2017, your community came together to create a shared vision for the future of Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2040. Tell us what this vision looks like.
Yeah, hi,
over to you.
So I do have the vision, just to give you context. So Action Station, yeah, we're a community campaign organisation. Our mission is, well, we use our community to achieve our goals. We also support other people to do campaigns, so individuals, partner organisations, other activist groups. Our mission is to uplift people and bring them together to achieve the change that we want to see in the world, which we can't do individually. Yeah, and in 2007 we co-created this vision for 2040 for Aotearoa, New Zealand. We chose 2040 because it's the 200th anniversary of the signing of Te Tiriti. And it's long enough away, it's 20 years away, or at that time it was 22 years, that it's enough time for imaginative thinking, but it's also close enough that you can think, what do we need to do before that time to make that happen? And the process that we went through was, it was a few different steps. We started with inviting our members to host in-person meetings in their own homes. They could invite friends or other members of Action Station to come along. And we provided a guided conversation, which started with the values that were important to them, or what they saw as would be important for them for New Zealand in 2040. We guided them through that. It was a 3-step process. We provided 6 possible stories that they could talk about at that meeting. And the 6 were common situations in New Zealand. So for example, somebody with a disability who wanted to move out of home for the first time, somebody who was facing a mental health issue, a family on a low income that were facing homelessness. And they were asked to talk about the story with the group in line with the keeping in mind the values that they held were important. We took their feedback. We consulted with issue experts, policy experts. We brought it together and surveyed our membership, and from that we created the vision. And I can read it, you know. So the common values that came out were equality and fairness, kaitiakitanga, aroha manakitanga. And it says, Aotearoa New Zealand will be a fair and flourishing country with care, creativity, courage and compassion at its core. We will honour Te Tiriti Waitangi and the rights of Indigenous people in our constitution, our institutions and in everything we do. Everyone in our country will be proud of Aotearoa for the positive role it plays globally. We will have a robust democracy powered by informed and connected citizens, guided by accountable leaders. In all our decisions, we will put the well-being of everyday people and all forms of life on our precious planet first, and government policies will build a society and economy that truly serves all of us. Every person in our country will be safe, welcome and included, and will have enough to live on, a warm, safe place to live, and the means and support they need to learn and thrive. So our campaigns for the next 20 years are based on this vision.
So I can see some of that resonating with some of the work we did at the board level around that sort of people being able to have a good life. It also is reflected in the SDGs. But what do you see as opportunities for activists and for businesses to connect on campaign areas as outlined in your vision?
Yeah, I found this question really interesting when I heard about it, because I don't have experience in the business sectors. And I just tried to think of an example of a business I think does it really well. And yeah, just also for context, I think as activists or as people, we work in the citizen space. So we talk to people as citizens. So as citizens, we have all these different kinds of opportunities that maybe we don't realize. So we can vote, we can sign a petition, but we can lead campaigns. We can, as a community, we can do campaigns. We can visit our members of parliament. We can donate money. We can fundraise. We can lead the change that we want to see within our community. And so Action Station is always talking to people as citizens. And I think as businesses, as far as I know, it's talking to people usually as consumers, which is, yeah, it's often different. It's talking to people as individuals. It's about often the advertising or messaging. It's about people experiencing freedom or power, or yeah, the messages in advertising are not about people recognizing their power as citizens. But I think it's totally possible for businesses to talk to people as citizens, and they do. And one example I thought of was Lush Cosmetics. So yeah, so Lush, it's based on principles of not harming animals. So I think the founders were animal rights people. They donate money, so they do these things called charity pots, where people they create a new product and they nominate a NGO or a charity or an activist organisation, and the money, people know that it's going to that organisation and they buy it for that reason. They also host campaigns in their shops, so they give visibility to campaigns. Action Station has done one campaign, it was about 3 years ago, to do with doubling the quota for people seeking refuge in New Zealand. They hosted the campaign in their shops. They provided information in their shop. It was visible in their windows. People who came into their shops were invited to take action on that issue, so they could sign a postcard, which was then sent to the Minister of Immigration at that time. Yeah, it was providing a space for people to act in their power as citizens. And actually, yeah, the quota was doubled in 2 steps over the last 2 years. Yeah, and I think, yeah, they do grants. So any organisation, an activist organisation or a charity or a community group can apply for grants to fund the change that they want to see in the world. So I think any activist organisation is always struggling to find funds or resources. I think, you know, it's also skills as well. So businesses probably employ the best communicators or communication experts in the country, and some of these resources could potentially be shared as well. Yeah.
It's very good. So from your talk, I guess what resonates with me is it's about uplifting people. So we're all better if everyone's uplifted. And thinking about thriving citizens, I quite like that. And also freedom and power of choice. And, you know, we're seeing it with millennials anyway. So we have to start to think differently about this. Thank you. So, Tony, Ports of Auckland has been open about its learnings from nearly losing its social licence to operate, or as my board chair says, actually contract to operate. And it's worked to re-engage the local community as a result of this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey?
Certainly. Look, I've talked about this journey, so some of you may have heard it already, but I like repeating it because it reminds me of the mess we ended up in. So in 2015, the community said no, and that was our effort to extend Bledisloe Wharf, and that was a time which really, in our history, changed our mindset. And I guess before that, we had adopted a sort of a harbour board mindset, which was like a big hammer and everything looked like a nail. So we had to change. And ultimately, what we would do under that sort of harbour board regime was, if we needed to increase capacity, we reclaim land. But the community said no, and we learned a harsh lesson. And it was a good lesson and a good bloody nose to have, because it's changed the way we work and the way we interact with the community. So, to cut a long story short, we undertook to develop a 30-year development plan, which talked about not only what it would do to our balance sheet, but what it would do in terms of sustainability, our social licence to operate, and the environmental consequences. And that 30-year master plan was developed in collaboration with the community and key stakeholders. We did a lot of focus groups, a lot of feedback, and it was completely open and transparent in terms of the projects we would have going on for the next 10, 20, 30 years. We approached that development plan in quite a different way. We used a lot of social media, normal media, but we got a 60% favourability rating from the public, which was the first time we'd ever got a favourability rating from the public. So that was a good first round. And then finally that plan was endorsed by council. So these are important steps in our history, and of course now we think about what we need to do around technology to improve our footprint. There is no more reclamation. We've made a commitment to the public that there will be no more reclamation. And the other part that we have done is actually appoint somebody to lead our community engagement. And that's worked wonders. And I'll give you an example compared to the Bledisloe, is that we want to dredge the shipping channel. So bigger ships are coming. And believe it or not, that is a non-notifiable consent, and you don't have to consult about it. But guess what we're doing? We're consulting and we're notifying. That's costing our company $1 million extra. So that's our commitment, as we said under that 30-year plan, to be open and transparent. And we've engaged with iwi, the yacht clubs, local boards, what have you, and no real criticism about what we're doing. So it just proves that actually if you do take a very open and transparent way and give people the opportunity to give feedback, it works. And all in all, I would say is we don't want another Bledisloe. And we've got lots of young people in our organisation who are there because they want to make a difference, particularly around sustainability. And I mentioned to Aimee just before, last year I ran 32 workshops which talked about our purpose. And the key headlines around that purpose was sustainability, environment, people, the community. So we're starting another 32 workshops which are talking about how do we then integrate those words into our values. So the organisation is changing. And as I've said, we don't want another Bledisloe. But I think to some extent we have regained our social licence to operate, but we lost it, and it's a very hard thing to actually get back.
Yeah. So other than the things you've just mentioned, is there anything else that you could see into the future that might change the way Ports of Auckland operates with community?
Well, I think we have a very bold, hairy, audacious goal, and that is to be emissions-free by 2040. That's our commitment. It's our commitment not only to the community but to New Zealand and to the world. And that can often be words on walls, but actually we're delivering. You know, we're doing a hydrogen project. We bought the first electric tug in the world. We're looking at how we can power our straddles with hydrogen. So we're really working for better outcomes and to be a much more sustainable option. And it's not just about the balance sheet. It's about what you can contribute towards better sustainable environmental options. So we're trying.
Brilliant. So for me, it's about relearning, rethinking, keeping promises and commitments and being transparent. Yeah?
Well done.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tony. It's an absolute pleasure to have Nola Smart here today. Nola wears many hats, including co-convenor of GenZero and advisor to the involvement of young people in Unesco's program as one of our youth leaders for New Zealand. So Nola, as an ambassador for change through both GenZero and Unesco, what sustainability issues matter to you?
Well, I think there's kind of two approaches to this. So through the Generation Zero lens, well, firstly, Generation Zero, if you didn't know, it's a non-partisan youth-led kind of climate activism group. You might know it because of the Zero Carbon Act that's been going through Parliament, or in Auckland, the scorecards that get done for local elections, that sort of stuff, submissions, guidance for bills and stuff like that. But mainly it's all about how we can mitigate or adapt to the effects of climate change, which can be done in many different ways. In terms of the sustainability issues that matter through Generation Zero, the approach that I take to it is I'm really interested in how cities can become more resilient and more sustainable. So with the local team up here in Auckland with Generation Zero, it's all about how we can get better infrastructure, better public transport. You have to think about where we're putting housing, how we're doing our housing, how we're providing all this infrastructure for cities to really function and be more regenerative into the future. So that's kind of the whole sustainability around how our cities actually function. So that's kind of the side I take to do with Generation Zero. And then with UNESCO, so UNESCO is the education, scientific and cultural part of the UN. And there's New Zealand National Commission here in New Zealand. And then underneath them, there's the Aotearoa youth leaders. So we're kind of like a reference group for the National Commission. So we have input into their strategies, their funding, that sort of stuff. We're ambassadors for UNESCO and communities. In terms of that, we have a much broader approach to sustainability. So the issues that we really focus on are more cultural ones and social ones, as well as the environment. How do we promote cultural identity and create a more just society? We have had strategies to do with how we can use Indigenous knowledge to make more sustainable futures, which is something I find particularly interesting, as well as like making more global citizens and being better prepared for these future scenarios. So yeah, it's environment is more like Generation Zero, and then when we move into the more social and cultural sides of sustainability, it's more through UNESCO that there are different issues that we can try and, I don't know, do something about. Because the reason that, for myself, that I think these things are important is because there's only so much you can do at your personal level. Of course, you can make changes to how you, I don't know, how much you drive, what you buy, that sort of stuff. But individually, you can only make so much difference. And so really what we need is higher up change. And we can do that through changing policies and making a difference at a higher level than just your personal choices you make in your life. So yeah, lots of different sustainability issues in there, but all equally important, I think.
Yeah. So how do you think that businesses can better listen to the voice of young people?
So I think this is a really difficult question. I think there's no perfect answer really
You
to
can
this.
challenge us.
I think probably most importantly, interacting with youth as businesses can't just be like a tick box of, yay, youth engagement, done, you know, sort of thing, because you can never represent all youth. Youth is such a diverse group that, it's not just talking to one person or a few of them is like all youth represented, tick the box and we're done. It has to be more of just an engagement and a flow of like communication between them to create relationships, and then you can get more out of it, both youth and businesses, especially in terms of, I don't know, I feel like if it's a one-off and the youth are less likely to get involved if they feel like they're not getting anything out of it because youth are busy, they've got other things to do. And so I think it's more about having like mutual benefits from it, whether that's being that they give their perspective on things and then in return they can gain skills, exposure to things, just build relationships and have ongoing conversations about things, because youth are very interested in different areas which you wouldn't even really expect, and the whole business I think can really delve into that, and I think it's a really cool opportunity for the future. Even just, I remember back in high school, they're always wanting mentors from different businesses and things to come and help with projects at schools, and even at uni there's other initiatives like that, and that's a really cool way that you can listen to youth while it feels like a productive sort of interaction for both sides of it, which I think is the most important part really.
Okay. So it's our SBC's birthday. We're 20. We're pretty young, aren't we? I did try, Abby. And today we've been discussing what a positive future for our country looks like in 20 years' time. Eliot, you talked about your vision for 2040. We've got the SDGs, 2030. So I'll just open this to all of you. What does a better future look like for you, for New Zealand? Just quickly and off the top of your head. Go, anyone can jump in.
Should I start off?
Yeah, go.
So of course there's so many different parts to having a nice future in 2040. Of course I think being carbon neutral or carbon regenerative is a primary part of having a good future, but also having a just transition to this so that we're bringing everyone along in the journey, and that it's allowing everyone to do this comfortably and within their means so that we're not leaving anyone behind. Under this, there's of course, my vision for 2040 is having this amazing, like Auckland having amazing public transport. We have great cycleways, everyone's enjoying the city for what it can be, and I think that, the most important part in all of that is that it's not just a future for a few, but a future that everyone can take a part in, which I think is what having a just transition to 2040 would be all about, really.
That's nice. Not just for a few, just future for everyone. Anybody else like to have a go at answering that question?
I'll probably build on what you've just said around all of us working together to tackle the inequitable kind of things that we're seeing in this country, and to work, you sort of mentioned the sort of systemic forces that are holding some of these challenges in place, and I think it takes really bold leadership and kind of creating a container in which to kind of explore some of these really important challenges together, and all of us kind of thinking, how do we dismantle the things that are actually no longer serving us? That would be, I'm sort of a health person, I've come up through that discipline, so for me I think a lot about outcomes for people and their health and well-being, and in the health space, and I think it goes way beyond, like a lot of the foundations for thriving is around social connectedness, and how are we building communities that we feel connected to each other and we can mobilise together around the issues that are important. So that would be the kind of future I'd like to see for my children in mokopuna, is a increase and again a bit of a return to possibly some old ways of being.
That's exactly right. Anybody else? Tony?
I would
just say that what I've learned, or what we've learned as an organisation, is to fight climate change and to be emissions-free by 2040, you need collaboration. Whether it's with the manufacturers of your equipment or whether it's what we've done through the Climate Leaders Coalition. I mean, I've had a lot of, what I would say, a lot of gained confidence in what we can do as a result of being part of that coalition. And being part of that coalition, there's a lot of peer pressure too on, I'm doing this and you're not, and vice versa. That's so right. I think that in itself is provided significant momentum.
So we were just talking about at our table, like I feel quite superior driving around in my EV. And I don't mind saying that. Eliot?
Yeah, I'm really inspired by the idea of regeneration that you're talking about. So not just sustainability, but actually having a really positive effect. So it's not just doing the minimum, but actually doing good and benefiting. And yeah, I think something we see in Action Station, because we're multi-issue, so we deal with a lot of different topics, is that people don't just care about the environment. We're also dealing with issues with mental health, with the justice system, with welfare system, with everything system. And I think something that's kind of missing maybe in New Zealand is actually a unified vision for the country. And lots of people have lots of different visions, and there's this sense, that's where some of the sense of the panic maybe around climate change comes as well, because we don't have a clear path. If there is a clear path, then actually all these different agents, businesses, communities, farmers, whoever, we can just get on and do our projects because we know where we're heading. It's not that we've sorted everything out, but we know there's a path ahead. So I guess, in the future, it's not that we've solved everything, but everyone's not panicking. Everyone's positive about the future. And also, it's also answering these other questions about, for example, mental health. So it's not just addressing sustainability, but addressing sustainability in the sense of improving our mental health, or vice versa, because all these issues are interlinked. And a really big one for New Zealand is dealing with colonisation, and I think that's underneath a lot of it too.
Wow, that's a big challenge. That's a big summary, but I think you're on the right track. We've got some questions on Slido, and some of them are for specific people. So, Tony, you've got a history of learning from young people. Can you tell us about this?
Yes. Well, some years ago we employed a futurist, and he suggested that maybe you need youth to have a look at your organisation and your business, because they come with a different perspective, a different lens. So we started a graduate program where these young, enthusiastic, wanting to change the world tomorrow, come in and they spend 6 months in a department, and then they write what they think is future state for that department, and then they reverse mentor the management team as well. I remember being confronted in my first reverse mentoring, and she said, "How long have you been CEO of the Ports of Auckland?" I said, "Oh, since 2011. That's a long time." Next question. No. So it is quite confronting, but actually really good.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very brave. Again, an example of bravery. So Nola, while there is talk of business engaging with a wide selection of youth and not just box ticking, can you give us some practical suggestions on how? Because you talked about relationships and mutual benefit and things like that, what's in it for everybody. Yeah. So how would you see that practically rolling out?
Oh, difficult. Of course, things like internships I think are really important to young people, or it sounds awful, but offering some sort of freebie because young people, often they don't have that much money. They might have uni, they might have part-time work, they've got a whole lot of stuff going on, so they have to feel like their time is valued. And whether that's through free food or, I don't know, something from your business, or even like a donation to something, it will make them feel like they're being valued. And it doesn't have to be something necessarily for them, but like I was saying, like a donation that they choose, a charity or something like that, it makes them feel like their time's worthwhile. And yeah, I don't know about, it's a very difficult thing to do in a full-on proper way of how to engage with a variety of youth. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. I think the main thing is being very open and allowing for communication in the first place. So while everyone says social media and technology, like that is the way you connect with the youth. I'd say that, amongst other things, talking through schools, universities, getting involved in those spaces, I'd say are equally as important as social media, because you're only gathering a certain part of the population of youth if you're just going through those means.
At Wellington Zoo, we're 68% millennial. Food works a wonder. Every time. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I support that. With our kitchen table conversations, I mean, one of the features was food, and it's a very sharing thing. Like when you share food, it's you're on the same level.
Yeah, it's good. Okay, I might take a couple of questions from the floor. We'll just do one more and then we'll come to you, okay? So there's a couple here. There's one that's, whoever wants to answer this. The word value keeps coming up, and yet as New Zealand citizens, we have no common understanding of what this should look like. How do we get this common understanding of value?
Value or values?
No, value. Value, so, you know, creating value, you know, things like mutual benefit, those sorts of things. How do we get an understanding? Because some people might say, you know, making a profit is value. Some people might say it's shareholder dividends, or someone else might say involving community. Yeah. Tony?
And I think that's a journey we're on, is that you need to invest in sustainable outcomes. And what we're looking at is what internationally is being done in terms of the percentage of net profit that is actually going back into sustainable outcomes. So I think that our mindset as business is not just around a strong balance sheet and reinvesting in the business. It's about what can you actually bring to bear that will ensure the community, the environment, and you have good social outcomes. So I think that's a real mindset change, not at just management level, but certainly at director level as well.
It's certainly a system change, isn't it, in terms of that thinking? Sorry, question.
Yeah, hi. This has been great. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had a whole lot of young leaders sitting up here talking to business. I can guarantee that. But my question is, and this is year after year after year, and I was no different. I was probably 30 before I voted. So how do we get the youth to vote and actually have some influence on the elections?
Great question. Go for it. Oh, look, the activist will answer.
Can I say I don't know? I mean, at the moment we're trying to get our membership excited about local elections, and it's really hard.
Maybe we need more young people standing.
Can I add on to it? Yeah, so with Generation Zero, we do scorecards, and I think a lot of the reason that people don't vote is they just actually don't really know. And the issue is that local elections, there are so many people, and local boards, you don't know who these people are that you're voting for. You literally just have their name, maybe some spiel that they've written to make them sound good. And so everyone looks good. You don't know who to vote for, and it turns out that you're just like, why do I bother when I don't have any more information on them? And so with Generation Zero, the way we're trying to help with this is through a climate change lens. We go and interview all councillors, all mayoral candidates, and we've got a questionnaire going to all local board candidates, and we then score them out of different sections, and then we promote these scores so that people at least have some sort of idea of what they're voting for. And in that way, I think it has improved. I can't remember the exact numbers, but the amount of people that interacted and young people that interacted with our scorecards in past elections has shown that it does make a difference, just simply information. So
I don't think that's
really
just for young people, I might say. Can I have a look at that? Yeah. Another. Sorry.
I just
sorry,
add
Eliot.
on. I think if people do vote before, when they're the first, there's more chance of people voting in the future if they've voted once, and so if you can get people voting, it is really important. And I think the main things are if you can connect to issues that they care about. It's not focusing on policy. I think creating communities that vote. So if people around you are voting, there's lots of ways to do it. It's not happening at the moment.
Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? You've all been very good on Slido, I must say. We've talked about voting, we talked about that. Tony, this is one for you. Ports of Auckland has a set of ambitious goals, some where there's actually no clear path to achieving them. is it better to do this than to cautiously set goals that can be achieved?
Well, I've always said that you've got to be bold, and I talked already about you need to collaborate if you're going to actually make a difference in terms of fighting climate change. So we've got, I would say, some dinosaurs. That's not just customers, but we've got some dinosaurs also in Auckland that are not thinking about what they need to do as a business to change and to be emissions-free by 2040. I was happy to be part of the Net Zero Carbon conference for transport down in Christchurch, and I have to say I think that what we saw there again was collaboration. That was businesses saying, yes, we want to make a difference. Let's not go off individually and try and change the world. Let's put it together and get the support of the Sustainable Business Council to do something. So I think they've got to change, because I think if they don't change their business model, there will be a different outcome and people won't use them.
Yeah, exactly. Right, any other questions from the floor? Are there any questions from the online people? Jay? No? Okay. Okay, some final thoughts from the four of you. What are your top tips for companies wanting to engage with their local communities from your perspective, working with community? So top tips, so give us two. Two top tips. Tell them what. Aimee.
I would say bring food. No, I'm stealing your idea. Food is a biggie, but I think there's something about making a really strong commitment to building your cultural competency, particularly when we're thinking about working with Māori. And probably my other thing, kind of building off that, would be if you are really interested in some of that stuff around returning to Te Ao Māori, like thinking about the way that you engage with people and how you might embody Māori values around things like kaitiakitanga and manaakitanga, which goes to the food thing, like how are we being hospitable, how are we acting as guardians of people's kind of stories and what they share with us. These sorts of things, I think, go a long way to creating safe spaces for people to genuinely participate.
Yeah, that's nice. Eliot?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of ideas. It's going to communities and creating spaces for communities. So I imagine as businesses, like, you're not necessarily in one place, and it's wherever you can create a safe space for people to come together, then solutions happen, I think. And if you can do that, maybe it's virtually or in a physical place, or it's at an event. And yeah, where is it? Sorry. Yeah, and the other way around, just being aware of communities. Like, communities aren't necessarily very strong in New Zealand at the moment. Like, there's so much pressure around people being isolated or feeling isolated and not necessarily feeling part of a community. And maybe it works both ways. Like, if you're creating a space, like, actually just building community is a really great goal to start with. And then going out to communities, just being aware that maybe they're not strong themselves, and recognize. We have many of these questions ourselves, like how can we connect? Well, how can I, as a campaign manager, support other people who are doing their own campaigns to connect with tangata whenua? And there's not one rule, because it is about relationship, and it's actually us finding out who they are and where they are, and sorry. I think
it's good.
Lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I'm writing down notes. Nola.
Well, I'd start off by saying it's all about open discussion, and not just the one time, but ongoing opportunities for them. So keep them in the loop beyond engaging with them, so that at each step of the way they have some sort of say in the process of what you're doing. If people are interested in something, they will want to be engaged. So give them that right to have a say and learn from that. Also, I'd say that, it's that whole mutual relationship thing. I've said it before, but it's about really allowing these relationships to form and that way you can both gather information out of something. And in the second part, probably just give incentives. Let's be real. If
Eliot.
there aren't people wanting to engage straight away, it's because they're probably very busy. It's not because they aren't interested. And so by giving incentives, you're just giving them that extra little push.
Eliot, you've come back to your train of thought, have you?
Yeah. I think even when you're talking to a group of people, you might actually be creating that community as you talk to them, because they might not recognise themselves as part of that community. And just to add on one more thing, people are parts of different communities, so somebody can recognise themselves as one thing and another thing at the same time. So a community that I've become more aware of over the last couple of years that I've worked with Action Station is people who identify as being disabled, and actually spending time in the spaces with them, recognising that they have certain needs, and they like to run a meeting with people who are blind or deaf, for example, requires different access needs, and it's actually just waking up to the fact that there is this community out there, and that's not just one community, because the deaf community is different from the blind community.
Tony.
I think that you've got to create a platform where people can give open, honest feedback, but make sure you do something about it within 24 hours. We've appointed, as I said already, somebody who's leading that community engagement. That's really helped. But what's also helped us is through polling. We poll 200 households every quarter. And through that, we've created focus groups, and you can certainly get some very open, honest, truthful feedback when you engage with people in focus groups. So our challenge actually is we've been trying to expand that community engagement, and we get a lot of, you might say, interest and action from our local community, but from beyond that, no. And we've really tried, but it's been quite difficult.
These guys might have some answers for you. Yeah. Thank you all very much for your insights and your passion for the work that you're doing. So what I get from it is no panic. We need system change. We need to improve our cultural competency, and we need to come together. So, you know, we are a social species. That's what humans are. And we all want to thrive. So for me, it's all about nourishment, which comes back to food. So thank you all very much for your input today. Thank you so much.